Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our webinar series, Embracing Change. Today, we've got Tania from, I guess, Switzerland, France. You're across the border. Tania? There you are.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome, Tania. So just, thank you for taking the time and being here today. I know it's 1 o'clock. Hope you've had your lunch or maybe after. So let's get into it. Why does MovementWise, and what does it mean, and why does it matter? And how is it relevant to all of us, irrespective of age, irrespective of gender? I mean, just the fact that we're human, right?
Yeah. I would like to just begin with maybe asking everybody a question, and that is, how aware are we all of how we move? And I'm interested to know if your posture and movement habits are accelerating wear and tear and causing your body to break down, and for you to become old before your time, for you not to be able to live the whole of your life with a real quality of life. It's all about now the quality of life lived, but also really understanding what is your performance potential. And when I say performance, that's how you do whatever you need to do or want to do in your life in the way that enables you to thrive, not just survive. So if we begin by maybe exploring the cause of pain, injury, and disease, in particular recurrent injury and recurrent pain. But first of all, the other question is do you have the freedom of movement in your body and in your mind? Because when we talk about the body, I'm talking about it in a non-dualistic sense. And we're going to explore that a lot further, how both are very much interdependent. And how important it is for us all to be able to express ourselves through our bodies, both physically, athletically, but also intellectually, creatively, artistically, musically, and also through our body language. I mean, movement is just so much more. A lot of people come to me and say, oh, I don't do sport. It's so not about that. It's how we move through life and we act, and it's how we interact that is really important. So when we look at the cause of pain, injury, and disease, and here I am talking more about physical pain, although it's interesting that emotional pain has the same impact on our deep protective muscles. It makes them go on holiday, not work well. But the cause of pain, injury, and disease, Professor Shirley Salmon, who's from Washington University, who wrote a wonderful book called Movement Impairment Syndrome, she identified 3 causes of musculoskeletal pain, injury, and disease. That's things like back pain, neck pain, or muscle pain, joint pain, nerve pain. And on the one hand, we can have an accident. So we could tear the ligaments in our knee, or we could tear the muscles in our shoulder, rotator cuff. And then we can have pathology. We could be born with something. So something that's systemic, that's within our blood, something like a rheumatoid arthritis or ankylosing spondylitis. But the most of our pain, injury, and disease is driven by our habitual posture and movement. So particularly repetitive movements and sustained postures. So poor posture and movement habits really cause our body to age very unsuccessfully, accelerate the wear and tear, but also limit us in what we can do and in the perception of what we can do. So it affects not only our competence, but also our self-confidence, how we feel in our bodies and in ourselves. So it's much greater than just being able to reach up, touch down, and do the activities we want to do. But it's also our ability just to fully participate in life, and to perform at our best, whatever performance means to us, and we'll explore that later. So one of the questions, yes.
Go ahead, sorry.
One of the questions I get asked a lot is, I've got these bunions on my feet, or, oh, I've got this, bison's bump or dowager's hump on the back of my neck. My grandmother had it, I've inherited it off her or him or whatever. And I think this is an important question. And I really want to address that, because first of all, we have to know that change is possible, and that change is possible for us. And if we feel that that's our lot and we've been born with it, then that's end of story to begin with. We feel that there's nothing I can do to improve the way I move and improve my enjoyment of life or the things I do. So we have structural, we could have a structural problem. So I could be born with a limitation of movement in my hips because of the way my hips are different from birth. Or I can limit myself the range of movement in my hips. So my pelvis, if I move any joint in one direction, in fact, I'll show you and give you an example in the shoulders. So if I move any joint, I can reach up to the sky here. I've got full range of movement. But if I drop my shoulders, or in fact, if I drop my head and my shoulders move together. So I drop my head, I drop my shoulders, then this is my rotation. I don't know if you can see that. That is my rotation. If I open up my shoulders, so I lengthen through my spine, so it's my vertical axis, and I open my shoulders, so that's my horizontal axis. This is my range, and this is my range of movement. Here, this is my range of movement, and now I haven't got full extension. So many of people's limitations are due to actually not understanding in their own bodies how to have access to that range. And then through that, having access to the range, having access to the inherent protection and the brakes and the steering that we've got around each joint by setting ourselves up well. So we can set ourselves up for success, to move well in a very energy efficient way, to have freedom of movement and to feel that movement is smooth and effortless. Surely this is something that we all want to feel. Or we can actually cause limitations in our bodies without knowing it. And sometimes it's something so simple and so small. And that's really the message I want to bring here. Sometimes it's just one thing is so simple that if you'd known that early on, not only would you have avoided the wear and tear that then makes it become irreversible, but it opens up a life of opportunity to you.
But I think to step back 1 minute on that limiting belief, right? That I'm born with this and my father or my mother or my siblings or whatever it is. I think we need to, how can you help people truly, embody that that's not the limitation. There is possibility. Maybe you want to share a story. I don't know. I'd like them to embody it, because, hearing it is one thing, Tania.
Yes. Yeah.
And embodying it, physically, mentally, emotionally is a different, because that's, we all know we are our limiting belief, right? In terms of.
Oh, yes. I mean, yes. That whole psychological, we are as limited as we are inflexible. Yeah. I like this saying because really that describes where a lot of people's limitations come from, because they just don't realize what they're capable of. So if I were to give you a story, I would give you a story of Roger, if I were to give him a name. In fact, I met you at the Summit of Minds conference, Feisal. This was somebody who, a mutual friend of ours said, oh, you've got to see Tania. He'd suffered from an Achilles tendonitis, so the tendon at the back of our ankle, for over 9 months, and it was being treated very locally, and it just wasn't going away. And this was a man now just turning 70, so in his late 60s. Wow. But really, I could just see that he said, well, I was playing with my grandchildren. What did I expect? I shouldn't be doing that at my age. But looking at him, when I talk about the story in people's bodies, well, and he'd lost all his flexibility. He moved like a piece of wood where you didn't see the joints become part of his movement anymore. And when we looked at his body, first of all, he had 3 risk factors. One, as I said, with the shoulders, if I drop here, I limit my rotation. He had sway. If I'm going to show you sway, I'm going to stand up. Sway is when we let the pelvis sway forwards. Okay, my weight is over my heels. As I sway the pelvis forwards, the weight comes over the front of my feet. So he was constantly loading his calf muscles. So his calf muscles became overactive. And then because they became overactive, he limited the range in his ankles because his calf muscles became short, tight, and overactive. So to compensate, we talk about restrictions and then compensations, he would turn his feet out in a duck position. And there was rolling over the side of his feet. But again, he just thought this was an inevitable. This was just him. Nothing could be changed. So the sway, the compensation, and then the chest drop. So locked-in syndrome. And I call this locked-in syndrome because now I've lost all the rotation in my body. And for movement to be smooth and effortless, all movement involves rotation. And also you need then, and the whole body needs to be connected as a whole movement system. So the moment you drop, you disconnect the movement system. And then, so it's really just for each person looking at their risk factors. And he felt, well, my calf muscles have always been tight. In other words, that's part of me. Well, it's not. His calf muscles were tight because he swayed forwards. He was just relaxing into that forward sway, or that's what he felt. I'm just relaxing rather than, and therefore I'm just born like that, rather than bringing the pelvis back, allowing gravity to support you and unloading the calf muscles. And then that center of gravity around your pelvis, allowing that to be kind of the center of you that allows you to connect as a movement system.
Can you show the difference? Because you showed us what he was doing.
Yeah, so basically here, if I'm moving, just take that out. Here, if I'm moving forwards, now I have the weight over my heels as I sway forwards, my calf muscles are loaded up. So they're now a postural muscle. But if I bring them back, I'm unloading my calf muscles actually, but now my bottom muscles start to support me against gravity. So here, if you like, my bottom muscles become like rotten tomatoes. And when I come back, they're just like, just ripe tomatoes. And that's the difference. Now I have this, and then as I open my shoulders up, which you can't see, there's a whole tension that goes through my body that allows me to be connected as a whole movement system.
And the gut, the belly is tight or not tight when you're relaxed? Is it?
Okay, well, if I sway forwards, first of all, my bottom muscles go on holiday. And actually that's Professor Shirley Salmon's work, that sway, it inhibits or it delays the activation. In fact, it makes them go on holiday. And then by disconnecting, my abdominal muscles become, the tone goes. So often you see what I call, excuse the technical expression, pancake bottom syndrome, and then just the belly that just hangs unsupportedly. But actually what's really happening now is that your natural corset isn't there to protect you. And this movement, it creates a shear at the base of your spine. Okay. And now also the hips in my sockets, they're being pushed to the front. So now the hip joint isn't centralized in the socket. Okay. The spine is shearing, and the muscles that normally act to protect you, because you're leaning on passive structures, they think, the brain goes, I don't need the muscles to work. So the muscles go on holiday, and we're leaning into passive structures that become loaded. And we're causing stress and strain and abnormal wear and tear over time. Okay. So if I was to be here and I said, stand up, you have your balance muscles. Your balance muscles are really in your bottom muscles, but it's also the whole connection with the whole body. But if you're swayed forwards, there's nothing there to support you. And it affects everything above, everything below, and accelerates the wear and tear and your ability to control movement. It changes, we call the length tension relationship in muscles. So it changes the way that the optimum length of muscles to work around each joint to protect it. So our big movement muscles, our big multi-joint muscles try and compensate, and they become overactive. That's when we feel the iron bars on our back, or we're holding with our quads or our calf muscles. Our shoulder muscles get really tight. Whereas if we connect and we use gravity just to support us, we use our non-fatiguing muscles to support us.
Because when you mentioned the word using gravity, right, people don't even understand what that even means. That's why I asked you to explain.
Yes, gravity is so essential, because if we feel supported by gravity, and if I push one leg down to the ground and stand on one leg, then the ground reaction force helps me
Yes,
stand
yes.
up and feel connected.
Yes.
And we can either drop down towards gravity, and we know what happens then. But if we resist gravity, actually gravity allows us to lengthen and open out and connect. And that is when movement becomes, really, really efficient and effective.
Well,
So
that's the thing, right? Even like Tai Chi, I remember that the team was doing movement practice. We do every Friday. They have a movement practice, and when they was asked to tighten the muscles, they all used their bodies to do it. While he taught them to use gravity and the earth to bring in that power, and that's why I'm trying to have you. I know it's not easy for everyone, but at least to have that option to understand what does that mean to use the empowerment of whether you call it Mother Earth or whether you call it gravity, whatever it is, to use that to uplift and strengthen rather than use your own energy, right? Use what's available.
Oh, totally. That was beautifully said, Faisal. And I think it's something that many people haven't really felt, and then they haven't appreciated that really nature has been designed to support us, and often we don't use what's available to us. And it's such a wonderful feeling when you feel that connection in the whole body and feel that you move as a whole movement system rather than laboring to move and try to make things happen. When you talked about contracting your abdominals, if I just bring my pelvis back and I open out, there's a natural reflexive tension that takes place. It's not me trying to go, and that's what a lot of people do. I must hold my tummy muscles in. No, let's put you in a position in which your bottom muscles and your abdominal muscles, actually, they work together to support you. And it's gravity that's allowing that to happen. And your anti-gravity, and you're feeling how gravity supports you, is allowing you to take advantage of that.
Yeah. All right. I guess towards the end, we can do some movement and you can help people move through that maybe.
Good. Yes, good.
That's a choice that you make.
Yes, totally.
That's how time flows.
Yes.
So you're talking about the whole human system. You want to share a little bit more of that, or is there something else you want to move to?
Let's just move on to the whole movement system to make sure we have some time to try some things out.
Yeah.
I think that there is a huge danger in this highly technological age for us to just become very distracted by data and seduced by scans, and misled by a common belief that where we feel the pain is often the source of where a problem is. And that's so very often not the case. And so if I give you an idea of that, an example, if we talked about how we position our joints affects how much freedom of movement we have. If I collapse my feet inwards, if I'm in sway, I allow my pelvis to sway forwards, and then my feet roll inwards, and my knees move inwards. The base of my big toe, we call it functional hallux limitus. Basically, the base of the big toe doesn't like to bend anymore. And so if I want to think of the source of low back pain, for example, we can all have the same thing on a scan, but completely different causes of that back pain that can originate from the big toe not moving, so we can't roll over the foot and allow the hip to extend, and then have a lovely energy storage, energy release, pendulum movement of the leg that allows the weight to be brought over the new leg, and it's very movement efficient. Instead, we start to take steps forwards and pull ourselves forwards rather than move like a slinky dink that generates its own energy and own release, and then it's just a joyful, very easy movement. So if my big toe can block that, but also if I drop my head and my shoulders and I have chest drop, and then whatever happens up here in my body, in my torso, that also the pelvis mirrors that, so we collapse in our body. And so then I'm starting here by doing this, I'm actually loading up my lumbar spine. So it could literally happen from a head position, starting from just think how many of us drop our heads to look at our phones, and how whatever happens to the head happens to the shoulders, happens to the chest, happens in the pelvis. So something as simple as the way you look at your phone and how many times you look at your phone a day by just dropping is something that can have a massive impact in weeks, months, years, and in a lifetime. So it's interesting to think today, what's the one small thing that could have a massive impact on your life? So your head position, just your whole, the way you set yourself up in your legs, from blocking that lovely mobility of your big toe, and to just being aware of sway, that you are actually bringing that back and connecting in your whole body. So the body is a whole movement system. And then we've got, it's that awareness of how form, our shape, follows function. We are what we repeatedly do. Okay. So, and that Wolff's law says that our body will remodel itself around the stress and strain we put on it. So if I'm always lifting by bending in my back, so I'll ask everybody a question. If you want to stand up, I would like everybody to stand up and actually just put their hand where they think their hip joints are. I know you can't see my head, but that's fine. So what I commonly see is that people put their hands here, and commonly people will think this is where their hips are. And if I trace that back, then I'm in my back. But our hip joints are actually in our groin. Yeah. All right. So this is where, if I bow in my groin, that's where my hip joint is. So, I'm in Switzerland. I've seen a lot of tennis players. So this would be my ready position. This is what you sometimes see, just the bending in where people think their hips are, rather than here. So over time, if this is what I'm doing, if I'm bending, one, I can't connect my arms into the rest of my body. So something as simple as not knowing where your hip joints are and bending at an area. So if I bend my back, if I'm bending like that, and then I stand up and I come into sway, it's like bending a fork back and forth. If I keep bending a fork, what will happen?
Eventually break.
Yeah, but my hip joints love to move. The big joints love movement. That's how they get their nutrition. And then my big, powerful bottom muscles around that hip joints have, incredible steering and deceleration, acceleration potential. So they're the brakes in the steering. If our body begins to move without brakes and steering, and we don't know where we really want the movement to happen, then we move at the little joints that aren't designed to move like that, then it doesn't take long, even in very young people. I've seen tennis players as young as 15 who, with the power of the serve behind a poor body position, have had stress fractures and have been put in body casts for 3 months. Wow. But in fact, we get them going very early. But yes, that's the kind of impact it can have. It's not an age thing. It's how we use our bodies and how we put stress and strain on, or we reduce the stress and strain. So in terms of the body as a whole movement system, we can actually learn to become more physically robust by using the inner protective anti-gravity muscles, so that our big movement muscles can do their job really effectively without causing stress and strain. And then, yes, and then we have a choice. Then we become very, very adaptable. So people think that physical activity is the answer to so many things, heart disease, obesity, mental health, all of these things. But what people don't really realize is that physical activity is an outcome, not a solution. If we move badly, if we do these sports, bending in our back rather than in our hips, we drop our chest rather than keep that lovely logo open. Everybody can always see our chest, and we've got a good horizontal axis. If we keep, I lost my drift a little bit there, but so we have a choice in how we move, to break our body down or become more physically robust. So the movement literacy is creating a broad movement vocabulary. The broader the movement vocabulary and understanding how our body works efficiently, the more we become adaptable, the more durability we develop in our body. So, diversity leads to durability, leads to adaptability. And that's what's going to give us longevity and successful aging, but also the potential to try so many of the things that could add joy to our lives and allow us to do new things.
So let's talk about that diversity, right? So when you say diversity, are you encouraging people to do different things 2-3 times a week? So that way they're doing, I do different sports, right? So can you explain a little bit about that diversity and irrespective of age? I mean, we've got, people on the call from their 20s to 70s.
Totally. Well, for example, if I just ride a bike, I'm just in that, what I call sagittal plane, forwards, backwards motion of the pedals. And therefore, I have no movement that involves rotation, that involves extension. So the more movement experiences that our body has, the more we maintain that diversity in our body that allows us to keep being able to do different things. So if we have a foundation movement vocabulary, then we're very open and we're very adaptable. Then if I want to try kite surfing, I want to try skiing, I want to learn the piano, I want to build a house, our body has a good overall condition that protects it and makes it, but also the patterning that's not too novel. And also we're talking about, when you talk about things like Alzheimer's and dementia, the more movement experiences we have in our body, all the neural connections, difference between walking on a pavement and walking on a path through the forest, then all those beautiful new movement experiences, just in having to adapt to the roots and the boulders and the trees and the different light and everything, that's all part of our whole movement system and our whole movement experience. And that really will impact the whole of our lives. When we think about the balance and the confidence and the competence we want to take through with us. So yes, doing different things in 1 week, but also trying different activities,
So newness. So
it's a newness. And also that whole process of learning. I have a lot of people who feel, for example, I can't ride a bike. You'll see on my website, I have Kate's story. She had breast cancer and she wanted to ride 100 miles from Olympic Park to Buckingham Palace, but was terrified about riding a bike. But once we got over that phobia, once we do something that challenges us, or it could be something as simple as doing a press up, that belief that I'm not strong, I can't do a press up. I have teenagers being screened for sports teams and they come to me going, I'm not going to get through because I can't do a press up. And gainage, this sort of plank position, for some reason, is one of the tests. But actually, when you teach people to connect through and they realize they can clip into the pedals, they do have the inner strength and strength to do that. They just didn't know how to connect to set themselves up. It goes back to Bandura's research work about overcoming phobias. Once you overcome one phobia, you think, oh, well, if I can do that, what else can I do? What else am I capable of? And that's the beautiful time. That's when you see people blossom, because you pick one thing that they do and they overcome that and they realize that they can, and how they can get better and how the body learns. How by taking movement breaks, doing some movement, walking away from it, the brain processing subconsciously, coming back, and then somehow the brain has processed it and suddenly realizing that you're more and more enabled through something that's happening inside you, then going, people then start to have the courage to have a go. And I think this is step one. One, is the awareness, but for a lot of people, it's the courage to have a go, to do something different, to do something new, and then to discover a passion that they may never have done before, or to feel a purpose and a potential that they didn't realize was there.
Just to step back to the story you were telling about Roger. We didn't finish the story. Sorry.
Yes.
I sent you on a different tangent. Maybe you want to finish the story before we continue.
Well, so Roger had a little mini discovery session. Within half an hour, we saw that the fact that he was swaying, the fact that he dropped his shoulders and he was locked in, the fact that he had restriction in his calf muscles that led to a compensation in his duck feet. You realized, well, having a bit of ultrasound on my Achilles tendon isn't going to sort this out. In fact, he then came back with his wife for 2 days in the mountains. But the interesting point of this story was, what was the story in his body? What movements were already there within him? So I asked him, so when you were 16, when from school to 18, what did you do? And he goes, oh, I used to play cricket. In fact, when I was 7, I was taught to be a fast bowler. In fact, the people that taught me became part of the English cricket team. And he says, oh, and I loved squash. And I'm thinking, wow, these are fast sports. They involve a lot of rotation. And here I have a man who has stopped moving and has stopped rotating and has a belief inside himself that it would be ridiculous for him to walk along a beach or play rounders with his, grandchildren. And the metamorphosis that happened in 2 days of just really the realizing that he could tap in to movements that he already knew and that are already there, is a wonderful thing. So the story that's in our bodies, some people are what I call used to do people, and they gave it up. They're very conscientious people, life got busy, as did his. He had a very stressful, a very cerebral job. And then so he gave up moving and just didn't know how to reconnect with his body and with himself, and that opening up and realizing that it was still there and how he could access that was great. And other people, it's about learning for the first time, but that we can all learn for the first time. And what are the small things that are just going to open the door? What's the key to unlocking that being able to really feel movement in your body in a way that it gives you freedom?
So there's also a mental aspect then, a belief aspect, or remembering, or an element of possibility, a knowing. So it's really about a knowing within, whether it's historical as in memory, or knowing that it's possible, which is forward and new. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, it is. It's either there, or if it hasn't been there, you've got to know that the body has an incredible capacity to learn and to learn new things at any time of your life. And it's really about then finding how that individual likes to learn, and how they can start to feel rather than think. Because if we can feel it, we can fix it. So number one is to allow people to feel things that they perhaps have never felt before.
The other thing is, obviously at a certain age, as you're telling the story, I mean, I'm even thinking of my own father, who now is 86. Now, obviously it would sound ridiculous, but that he hasn't played tennis since 1986 when he was asked to stop, right? So the question is, that's a very long time.
Yes.
Even if it's not that gap, right? A lot of the people who are older are worried and concerned about injury and risk of falling, risk of breaks, right? So how do you make that balance between possible and being obviously smart and mindful?
I think people that the first part is when I talk about movement literacy in the alphabet, I start with A, awareness, alignment, activation. In other words, you've got to be aware of the things that are going to make you high risk of having pain and injury. Because if you play tennis like this and you want your shoulder to be good, your risk of injury is very high. And alignment is about, yes, how am I not playing just tennis? I'm not hitting the ball with my arm. Yeah. My arm is attached to the whole of my body. If you can give people a sensation of what that is. And then activation. So once you've got that awareness and that, of your risks, but also the potential of how you can become more robust and resilient, through your alignment, and then the activation, then activate your protective muscle system. We talked about these anti-gravity muscles that when we line ourselves up, and then when every muscle is connected to every muscle through I talk about the fascial system. Yeah. It's like that shiny tissue on the chicken, that that white shiny tissue that envelops each muscle. And actually, when we set ourselves up well, every muscle is connected to every muscle. And so then as I take my tennis racket back, there's a tension across that allows me to connect right down to the bottom corner of my body. And then my body drives the motion. and not hitting with my arm. So it's about it. For any sport, it's being what's realistic and achievable within the right level of challenge for your level of ability. That's really critical. And if you keep acting the right level of challenge for the right level of ability, then you can progress, and then you can just see how far you can go. And that's a very individual thing.
So we've got a question here. Plus 50s have a tendency of not doing enough muscle strengthening to keep the joint fit and vital. What are the best daily movements to do?
Oh, I think there's two answers to that question. One, I think there's a whole body condition that we can be in. So that's the diversity of movement. And then there's, for every activity, there's going to be certain movements and muscles that you will want to first condition and strengthen. And then there's that inner strength. You don't have good strength without inner strength. That inner strength and belief, the competence that comes with the self-confidence. So it would be very hard for me to say, oh, these are the best muscle strengthening exercises. It's really about, for that person, what are their limitations in terms of where they don't have enough strength to meet the demands of what they want to do, both in life and in the activity that they want. So you want a base level for life, for the life you are leading. So context is king. I mean, it's really key, context. And if we take things out of context, we could just end up going, well, I'm going to do all these exercises to cover my bases. But no, but if I look at you and your movement system, well, very easily, like, for example, for me, my upper body is far less, if we're talking about strength, but it's, far less strength than my lower body, because I do cycling and skiing and lower body dominant. But I know to stay healthy, I need to work at a general condition. But then if I want to do, something that's more upper body related, then I want to look at both what that sport requires, but then maintain the balance. We know that a lot of tennis players worked a lot with their right arms, didn't work the other side of their body, and then you get this imbalance. So how can we maintain the body in balance physically, and also that sort of that connection, that really understanding how it's our movement patterns and the technique and efficiency that can make it smooth and effortless. And often it's not a strength problem that causes injury, it's a motor control problem. Motor control problem is the patterning and the sequencing behind the force. So when you talked about tennis players getting stress fractures, that's a motor control problem. Then not knowing how to connect the shoulder blade to drive the force, and for the force to be shared through the whole body. So strength is a big subject, because it's often misunderstood in where we get that real strength from. And a lot of us have strength that we don't use, and we don't know how to tap in that strength that's actually already there, just because we don't set ourselves up. Just like the teenager wanting to do a press up.
Yeah. All right. We've taken you on a tangent. I know you had a flow that you wanted to.
Well, I think probably people would maybe like to try and do some things to get moving, because I feel like I've talked a lot and people probably really want to sort of feel a few things.
Okay.
So I think in terms of moving, I mean, the first most important thing is for people not to overthink movement, but is to start to feel. You talked, Faisal, so beautifully about gravity, and I think that's one thing. So when people stand up, is that, and it's just that awareness, and it's about coming out of your analytical mind, that 5% part of your mind, into your feeling mind. If you can feel it, you can fix it. And so, are you aware? In fact, where your center, if you think of the pelvis very crudely as being the center of gravity, are we aware when we stand up? Well, are you aware? Are you all aware? Where's your weight falling down on your feet when you're in standing? Is it on your heels, or is it like Roger, that he just swayed forwards and it comes into the midfoot or the forefoot? So the first thing, if there was only one thing I could I could do that I think would have the most significant impact on the pain and injury of a huge, vast population, it would be that awareness of where your center of gravity is. And then that feeling of gravity, can we feel how gravity is supporting us? So that feeling uplifted by gravity. So I don't know if people want to stand up and start to just do a body scan, and then we'll try some functional movements. So I'm going to put my camera really on my pelvis. The first thing I want you to do, in fact, I'd like you to put your hands around your rib cage. And then feel that, a lot of us breathe very apically in just the top of our lungs. And if first of all, you start feeling how you can breathe out in your hands. And that as you sigh out, you really let go of all the air. And as you breathe in, be aware of the sensation of the air coming in. And then as you sigh out, try and sigh out all those thoughts and all that chitter chatter that's in your head. And take a nice breath in again. And try and come out of your analytical mind. And breathe out and come into your feeling mind. Just feel the ribs expand outwards. And just sigh out. Okay, and nice. And again, just breathe in. And then I'm not going to make this a breathing session, but it'd be lovely to have more time to do that. But then to be aware about where your pelvis is, then come into your feet and feel your feet on the floor and feel where the weight is and where is the weight on your heels in the midfoot. So if you can, feel how you can bring the pelvis back, but you can also allow it to drift forwards. And some of you may feel that, oh, I don't tend to drift my pelvis forwards. I tend to drift it to the side sway, and you lean on one leg. Those of you who may be mothers amongst us may have had a child that was supported on one hip. And think of what that does to the spine and the hip and that leaning into the hip. So then bringing that pelvis back to center. And then the other thing that you want to be aware of in the pelvis is this tilting of the pelvis. So if the pelvis was a bucket, I could tilt my pelvis forward as if I'm pouring water out the front. I can bring it back to the middle, and I can tilt it back as if I'm pouring water out the back and bring it back to the middle. So you want it somewhere, just somewhere in the middle. So you've got your pelvis back, weight down through your heels, your pelvis in the middle. And that should actually allow you to soften your knees. In sway, your knees will tend to lock out. Out of sway and with your pelvis in the middle, your knees should unlock, which means you're taking the stress and strain of the passive structures. And then we're going to move up the body.
So the lower glutes are a little tight. They feel a little tight.
Yes, and I don't want you to worry about tightening. So as we talked about the rotten tomatoes, as you sway forwards and coming back, you should feel a little bit of, don't try and clench them, but you feel a little bit more, there's more going on there now.
Yeah.
So go forwards and feel how squidgy those bottom muscles are.
Yeah.
And come back and feel how.
Yeah. Oh, and the knees are a little bit are unlocked, right? They're not locked.
The knees are unlocked. So your knees can be unlocked, but your legs are still straight. Often when your knees are locked back, your knees are in a kind of sway back position. So knees are unlocked.
Okay.
Good. And in fact, just really, I'd like you just to sort of do a knee bend there. In fact, if I had a knee bend here, do a knee bend and just be aware, are your knees coming over the tops of your feet on the outsides of your big toes, or are they actually your kneecaps pointing towards your big toes or on the inside of them? So what you'd like to do is your bottom muscles actually are going to be doing the steering of your legs to actually, as you knee bend, your knees come over the top of your feet. So if I was going to do this, imagine this is a jump land position, and my knees should be on the outside of my big toes, just over the tops of my feet, because then I don't roll onto the inside. I don't collapse the medial longitudinal arch. And my feet are like bridges, not fish. They're like, good. So just bending your knees. And now when we look at the upper body, I'd like you just to broaden your shoulders. Broaden your shoulders as if you've got a logo across your chest and you want the whole logo to be seen. And if I drop, then you'll feel that your tummy just goes slack.
Yeah.
And then if you broaden the shoulders, so you've got a lovely, this is your horizontal axis. And this is your vertical axis. So you want these two axes. So if I was then to bow forwards, if I bow forwards, I'm bowing up my hips. We've talked about where our hips are, and our hips are in our groin. And when you bow forwards, so whenever you lean forwards, I'd like always to be able to see that logo, because then you've maintained the vertical and the horizontal axis. And then you've got the lovely big joints and the big movement muscles moving in you, and there's no stress and strain on your body. Good. So, and then the head. So the pelvis, I would say, is number one. The head position, I call it a helium head. So our head is floating above our shoulders, which is nice when you've got broad shoulders. And then when our shoulders are broad, our arms hang off our shoulder girdle. If I drop my shoulders, you can see air between my arms. If I drop my shoulders, my arms become close to my sides. So our arms should hang. I call this hanging, and I call this dragging. So when we drop our shoulders, our arms off our shoulders and our shoulders come forwards, we really load these muscles up. These start to feel very tight and loaded. And then if I was to take a weight in my arms, then it goes straight into my back.
Lower back, yeah.
Yeah. If I'm open here and broad in my shoulders and I'm in hanging and my head is floating as a helium head and I lift something up, then the weight of my arm and the weight, whatever's in my hands, gets transmitted through my arm, through my shoulder, my collarbone, through my sternum, into my tummy muscles, into my bottom muscles. So that weight now is being taken. My arm is the connection. And yes, so keeping the shoulder blades broad connects your arms to the rest of your body. So keeping those shoulder blades, and that's a very difficult thing to say, because some people in the group may be aware that their shoulder blades at the back have a tendency to stick out. They might notice, you may have noticed, some of you, that they seem like little chicken wings out of the back, rather than broad and flat. Yeah. And that's how we want them, broad and flat. It's almost like you want a broad swimmer's back. Have you ever seen a swimmer standing in preparation? They stand there with their shoulders broad because they want that connection, because that first catch and pull in the water allows them to connect their fingertips, their hands, through the rest of their body. Just like a climber going for a small hold and pulling, that connection of the arm to the rest of the body is very important. And as soon as you drop the shoulder blade forwards and get that little chicken wing at the back, then you lose that connection, and then you've got a high risk of injury. But then you've lost the connection of the whole movement system. So that's
the weight on the feet. Where's the weight on the feet? Because I remember when we did the review together, my weight was more towards the heel, and you were asking to be more a little more balanced. You want to explain that?
You want your weight on your heels. Your legs come down, finishing your heels. You want the weight, so your pelvis is back, your weight is in your heels, but you want to feel the whole of your foot on the ground. So you feel weight on the big toe, you feel weight on the little toe, but you feel weight down to the heels, and your knees are unlocked, your pelvis is out of sway in the middle, and you feel, with the broadening of the shoulders, you feel the length in your body, and then your head. So your head, if we think of nodding, we have the atlas on the axis. The two top joints are nodding joints. Okay, and a lot of us have become habituated to having what I call a head forwards position, which puts enormous strain at the base of your neck. And a lot of people get a thickening of that area that we call a bison's bump. And it's always in flexion, it's always bending and never extending. And of course, that prevents us from being able to extend in our whole back. But also, if we're locked in here, for Roger, we talked about locked in syndrome. If I'm locked in here, and my pelvis also then does the same thing. It's locked in. I can't extend at the hip. And therefore, to walk, if we think about walking, which is so important, as I take a step forwards and I need to be able to roll over my foot, I need hip extension. I don't know if you can see that at all. Yeah. Hip extension means that when I release the leg, the weight of that leg swings forwards and brings my body over the new leg. But we also have in our body 5 energy storage fascias. So like big elastic bands. So as I take that step forwards, down the side of my leg, I've got iliotibial band, like a big elastic band, and it winds up. The weight of the leg and that rubber band, the weight comes over and it brings the body over the new leg. And then we talked about that slinky dink movement. But then the whole body, every movement is a whole body movement. So walking, it's my whole body setup that allows me to have that hip extension, that allows all the muscles then to work, energy storage, energy release. And then we have, as we said, we need the rotation. As soon as we're open, we have what we call a spinal engine. We've got a little bit of rotation and counter rotation between our body and the pelvis. So it's very subtle, but it's a spinal engine that just allows energy storage, energy release. Then we've got our iliotibial band that allows us to walk and run like a slinky dink. And then we've got what I call like little trampolines underneath our feet, that when we've got the brakes and the steering working in our bottom muscles and our center of gravity back and we can power forwards, then we've got our plantar fascia that allows us also to be very efficient in our movement. But the moment we collapse and don't use gravity to feel and work as a whole movement system, we have to make things happen than actually create the normal circumstances in which the body just loves to move and allows things to happen. Just like coming back, just reflexively allows my bottom muscles and my tummy muscles to start to work together, because different groups of muscles work together. Muscles don't work in isolation.
Okay.
So yes, let's have a let's just have a seat since you felt some things. So lifting, I don't know how much time have we got left. We've got 10 minutes.
7 minutes, yeah.
7 minutes. Okay. Yes, obviously there are a lot more movements we can do, but I'm aware that one, we might have questions, and two, it's good to look at what the benefits are of becoming MovementWise. And I think somebody said something once to me that really, that there are things that I don't realize, things like the top 2 joints of our neck allow us to nod, and the little things that people don't know, but once they do that, they go, well, if only I'd known. Somebody said to me, I don't do sport. In fact, my balance is terrible. When they said they don't do sport, I was out dog walking with them. I was actually in San Francisco walking with this person who was clearly very active, but felt that, oh, you're a movement specialist. Oh, I don't do sport, almost apologizing. I said, it's not about sport, it's about life. And she said, oh yes, and I've got terrible balance. And I said, but you can learn how to find balance. And she said, oh, well, I thought balance was like brown eyes. You either have it or you don't. So I think one of the benefits is starting to be aware in yourself of what's there, the potential inside you, and that realizing that change is possible for you and the positive change or potential that you can tap into. And the second thing is, so we look at identifying what for you are the important things. We had a question about strength. How is strength important to you for what you want to do and for what you want? And context is king. You as an individual, you're not an injury or disease. I want to look at you as a whole person in the context of your life, and it's about preventing injury. The second thing is getting people out of their heads and into their bodies, and if they can feel it, they can fix it. Once you start to feel different things, that you can transform harmful habits into really helpful and healthy ones that makes you feel that lovely feeling of energy storage, energy release, effortless, smooth movement that doesn't put stress and strain on your body. And then integration, I mean, a lot of it's about what does performance mean to you? So we talked about, performance is how you do, whatever you need or want to do in your life. And, whether you want to play with your kids or play a musical instrument, you want to climb the stairs or climb a mountain. You want to build a house, build a business. It's really important that we have an incredible capacity, and we've talked about, I didn't talk enough about breathing, but with breathing and movement, our capacity to change our state of mind, it's got to be one of our greatest skills. The first skill is letting go of our analytical mind, and then feeling it, really feeling it, and then changing our state of mind. So we don't start thinking, but we start feeling, and we start moving into a place where we can become intuitive, calm, and creative with our movements, rather than, that's in our beta state of mind. It's still very up here. In our alpha state of mind, once you tap into that competence, the movements that are in there, and the self-confidence, then it allows you and have that vocabulary, it allows you to become very creative with what you do. And integrating it into your everyday life is really what is important to you. People come to me and say, I have a pain, but the first thing I ask them is, what do you want to do with your life? If we move towards that, all the other things, the stress and strain, that will be handled. It's about, what do you really want to be able to do in your life for the whole of your life?
And they go into straight the physicality, or they go more on a broader when they answer that question?
I think it gives your meaning, it gives your movement meaning, purpose, and direction. Because I can give you a lot of exercises that could make you strong, but unless they have meaning, purpose, and direction, the brain will translate that very differently. If I I can get you to lift dumbbells up, but if I'm getting you to actually, turn it into an action, reaching up and putting something somewhere, your body interprets that whole movement and how you move very differently. But also, I want to be able to, actually, I want to build a house, or I would like to try a new sport. Let's work towards that. Or I want to be able to play with my kids. Or actually, I want to play the violin. So let's look at the things that are going to make that possible, but also that keep you healthy in your everyday life.
Okay, so I think on a last note, okay, so the question maybe want to ask everyone to reflect on is, what is your purpose, and how will the movement be able to support you towards that purpose, so that the meaning you give to the movement that you do it's embodied, it's personalized, it's got an emotional connection to it, rather than movement for the sake of movement or for strengthening the muscle. Am I hearing correctly?
Oh, totally. I have someone here who says, I just want to be able to, I just want to be able to go for a walk with my dogs. I'm putting up things that people have said to me. I want to be able to get back into skiing. I'd like to try off-piste skiing. I want to be able to play football with my son. Yes. And I think then we can look at the fundamentals of, the risks and the potential, but then we can steer it towards what will make those things enrich in your life.
And also sustainable, right? Because then it becomes a lot more non-negotiable, rather than, Tania told me this, or, ABC told me that, right? It becomes, okay, this is me moving towards my goal to live a life of fulfillment, which includes playing with my kids or skiing, off-piste or whatever, taking my dog for a walk, etc.
Yeah. And it's what makes it sustainable. It's not just if we move, it's how we move and why that's important. And the why is a really big driver. And the why is why I have patients who ring me up and go, could we just go for a walk now? Which I love, because I value the fact that they're excited to tell me how there's been this momentum that has carried them forwards, doing things that have been meaningful to them, rather than, oh yes, I did that set of exercises you gave me. And that is not sustainable. That will soon become boring if there isn't a real meaning behind it.
All right, Tania, thank you very much. The hour has flown. Thank you for the movement, and you know, and to teach us how to choose differently. And of course, for those who are privileged to work together with Genetic Care, I've had the honor and privilege to have one-on-ones with you, either physically or remotely, which obviously has already started to change their lives step by step. And we continue to obviously, you know, help people, support them, like you said, with their why, and bring meaning to that movement and to that purpose. So once again, thank you everyone for taking the time to be here. Thank you, Tania, for being with us. And
Thank you, Nigel.
thank you everyone, and we'll see you soon on the next webinar. Okay?
Thank you everyone who took part. I really appreciate it. I hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.